Hey guys, it's time for story time with Doc. Actually, every one of these videos is kind of like story time, so not really sure what to call this. But what I wanted to talk to you about in this video is the first two issues of Mark Bagley's run on Amazing Spider-Man. David Michelinie had been writer for quite a while, creating Venom with Todd McFarlane right around issue 300. He stayed on the title through Venom's return, Todd's leaving. Eric Larson became the fill-in penciler after Todd left, I think starting with issue 330, which was a Punisher issue. And then from there, he left after issue 350, which was a big explosive anniversary fight with Spidey against Dr. Doom. So with 351, we got a brand new penciler, and the inker was mostly Randy Emberlin, who had inked some of Eric Larson's stuff. So at least he was familiar with Spidey. And Mark was coming off of the New Warriors. He had been on the New Warriors for, I think, about the first 2 years of the title. It had, let's see, Nova was on that team, Namorita was on that team. I'm trying to think who else. There was 3 or 4 other characters that were on that team, and they were a big team. And I think Fabian Nicieza was the one that wrote the title. So anyway, so he decides to move over to the big leagues, and Marvel decides to hire him for Amazing Spider-Man. Now, Mark started off at Marvel by doing the Marvel tryout book, I think in 1987. And he never got word back from Marvel whether he won the contest or not, because the original tryout book, unlike the one that they did, I think in 97, which I have a copy of around here somewhere, but that original tryout book actually gave people a chance to become a writer, an artist, letterer, colorist, all of these different professions within Marvel Comics. And Mark actually ended up winning from the Marvel tryout book from the pages that he penciled. So that's when he took over New Warriors, then he moved over to ASM. So let's take a look at his first issue of ASM, issue number 351. It's cover dated September of 1991, and it features this amazing yellow cover with the Tri-Sentinel and Nova and Spidey. So you get this first page, and it says The Three Faces of Evil. And at the bottom, you have David Michelinie as writer, Randy Emberlin as inker, Rick Parker as letterer, Bob Sharon as colorist, Danny Fingeroff as editor, Tom DeFalco as editor-in-chief, and they proudly welcome aboard new penciler Mark Bagley. Mark was the artist on the title when I started reading Amazing Spider-Man about 10 issues from this. I started right at the Carnage Saga. What a place to start, huh? But I started picking this book up on the regular during that time. And because when Todd McFarlane was doing Spider-Man, the Objectiveless Spider-Man, then I didn't even know that there were multiple titles. I didn't know Web existed. I didn't know Amazing existed. I didn't know any of that. And one cool and not so cool thing is, when I started reading Amazing, I realized just how many issues there were of this book. Okay? Spider-Man, I'd started with number 1, and I'm like, oh man, it's Spider-Man number 1. I didn't know that they had multiple number 1s. They had Amazing number 1 from 1962. They had Spectacular number 1 from 1976. They had Marvel Team Up, which was, it was a Spidey book, but they canceled Marvel Team Up, and here comes Web in 1985 as the third book, and then Todd launched the 4th title in 1990. So anyway, to get back to Mark Bagley, you get this explosive, very kinetic artwork from Mark Bagley. It's almost as though Spider-Man is never not in motion. He's always moving. He's always, even when he's plastered onto a wall, then you get to see that he's still, he's thinking. He's in the thinking man position. He's trying to figure things out. But what I loved about Bagley was his line work. Okay, now he's still drawing, But as he's gotten older, and just like most of the rest of us, his lines have gotten thicker. The Spidey, let's see, when you see, just look at the detail on Nova right here, guys, and look at the detail on Spider-Man right there. And you can tell how fine and thin the lines were back then. You can see exactly how much detail he put into each and every panel. And that's what made me fall in love with Mark, was because the artwork just showcased always movement, just kinetic energy out the wazoo. He didn't necessarily show Spider-Man in insane poses like McFarlane would later on, but he did show off the spideriness. Like, for example, we've got this panel here where his eyesight is better than Nova's, and so he was able to see this particular little laser that was going across the floor. And he told Nova, he said, see that disc? It's sending out an invisible trip beam. These folks must be relying on interior security. And so Nova says, yeesh, I can fly and I'm strong. Those are reasonable powers. This spider guy is downright spooky. And then you get the coup de grace, you get the Tri-Sentinel. And even Spider-Man says, I was able to stop this thing before because I had the powers of Captain Universe. But now what am I going to do with it? How am I going to stop it? Let's see. One thing I've always loved about Bagley's artwork is how expressive and how emotive it is. The characters aren't just wooden pieces that stand there, but instead they're holding, exciting poses. It goes back to reading How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way with John Buscema, showing different poses and how things are supposed to look. But every once in a while you would also get this slick design for where the knuckles are on this machine. I didn't notice that in a lot of his artwork because he would only draw that on massive characters. So you didn't see that again until you got Atlas, the Growing Man. You see things like that, or when Graviton would grow huge in, I think, issue 17 of Thunderbolts, then you would see him kind of not draw as much detail. But one thing that I also loved about his artwork is he never skimped out on the webs. Now, if there was electricity coursing through Spidey's body or something like that, then he might make the webs disappear. Or actually, right here where you've got gas. And the reason that he did that was not laziness, but instead it was the fact that, when you're in a foggy area, you're not going to be able to see all the minute details. And whether you believe it or not, those webs are very intricate and they're very detailed. So, they go in different directions. They have a certain pattern, but they still, you've got lines going through here, and then there's lines that wrap around his fingers. And then, like I said, you can see here on the palm of his hand, he has lines that kind of branch out. So he knew how to draw Spider-Man, and he knew how to draw him extremely well. Well, that's the first issue. The second issue that we get is my extremely beat up original copy of ASM number 352. This time we have a not so interesting cover, I would say, because we once again have Nova and Spidey on the cover, but this time no Tri-Sentinel. So I don't know if he just didn't know, what he needed to put on the cover, but anyway, we've got Nova trying to fight off the Tri-Sentinel, and you get to see all of this amazing, speed line work, again, by Bagley. The whole point of these videos is to showcase exactly how good he was, and that sometimes you would see a panel just like this one with Nova that you didn't expect to see, with the speed lines behind him. It was pretty much over the shoulder shot, but there was nothing chasing him. So it's a lot of fun to go back and revisit these old issues and get to see the beginning of what would become, in my opinion, one of the greatest Spider-Man artists of all time. This book was called The Amazing Spider-Man, and to me, the time that Mark Bagley was on it was an amazing time with the way that he would find different ways to draw the characters, how he knew the body language and the physiology of these characters. And there's a lot going on in these books as far as action and excitement, but at the same time you get taken out of the story, or at least I do, when you don't have realistic figure drawing. And that's one thing that you've got Jim Lee, who does so much cross-hatching, and you get, the right around the diaphragm area here, you'll get those six-pack abs, and then you'll get that cross-hatching right off in here that defines somebody's stomach, or the biceps, or the jawline. And Mark Bagley is not Jim Lee level detail, but it's hard to put into words exactly why he is one of my favorite artists on Amazing Spider-Man. But it's just like he gets the characters, okay? Just like Jim Lee apparently gets Superman and Batman. He gets other characters too, but he definitely gets those two characters. And when he does them right. Mark Bagley, I've never seen Mark Bagley draw a bad Spider-Man. It just hasn't happened. Maybe a con sketch or something if he was in a hurry, but it's just like it's second nature to Mark. So thanks for joining me on this first video that's kind of showcasing the origins of Mark Bagley on ASM and his rise to superstardom. In the next video, we're going to talk about the first two issues of a bi-weekly, he got tossed right into the fire, a bi-weekly six-parter that came called Round Robin, the Sidekick's Revenge. And that comes for issue 353 and 354. So join me for that video. You guys take care, and I'll catch you later.